but the interest on the debt right now is higher. It's over $1 trillion. It's more than we're spending on our defense budget.
Hello and welcome. I'm Gino Barbaro here with my husband, Gino. We are founders of Barbaro 360. Welcome to the Julia and Gino Show.
We're going to jump right into today's show because it's a topic that is near and dear to my heart. It's to Doge or not to Doge. That is the question. I was in college in the early 1990s, sitting in a finance classroom, talking about the deficit. We've been talking about the deficit for years. Back then, it was close to $4 trillion, and they were warning about the impending doom of us overspending. So this is not a recent phenomenon, but my wife came up with this beautiful analogy. She does that often. She keeps things simple because she knows that I'm a simple person, and she has to make these concepts very simple. We're going to try to relate about what's going on in this current economy, climate that we're in, and try to bring some reason, some clarity to what's going on.
Gino, when we were talking about Doge and what they were doing in the government, and I was like, finally. And I say that because it reminds me of a household. It reminds me of the way we raise our family, the way kids are starting growing up, and we don't even know where the money's going. The kids are going out, they go for coffee, the way they go see their friends. And at one point, I'm like, where's all the money going? Like, where are we spending? It's kind of just, and we don't want to, as parents, we're cautious, right? Because we talk a lot about happy money, especially in your book, Happy Money. We don't want to interrupt, or we don't want to cause an issue at home sometimes. And so sometimes we don't talk about it. We don't say anything. But seeing what's happening in the government and how all the cuts are happening and just seeing where the money's going, I'm like, this is a good time for us to reflect and to see what's going on in our house. It reminds me of just being a parent of maybe teenagers, young adults, and having no clarity on what's going on, and us stepping up and saying, hold on a second, let's actually take a deep dive and look at our finances, look to see where the money's going. And yes, there's going to be some kicking and screaming.
Well, it's interesting that Julia says, that's all I've been doing for the last 15 to 20 years of my life with my kids. And I'm a steward of my money. And the problem is, in the national consciousness, we become entitled. We expect it. Well, if there's a program that's not necessary, that shouldn't be funded, it shouldn't be there. And it's the same thing personally. Yeah. Go through your personal credit card statement. I challenge you right now. At the end of this podcast, sit down with your kids. Did you need to go to Starbucks every day? I'm not saying you should or you shouldn't. Are you entitled to? We have so many different subscriptions, whether it's Netflix, whether it's Zoom, whether it's Adobe, whether it's Ring, whether it's Apple, whether it's Prime, whether it's Disney. And the list can go on and on. Now, if you're the government, it's one step further. It's even worse. It's not their money. That's the problem that I have. They're not being good stewards of our money. And it's the same thing as our children. If you have a millennial or a young child living in the house in their 20s and they're living high off the hog, whose fault is that? That's the parents' fault. That's our fault. We haven't taught them about money. We haven't taught them about becoming responsible. They're just used to it. And how can you deal with that situation? You may be finding yourself in that situation right now. Well, what do? Well, it's time to cut the cord. And I think that's what's happening right now. Listen, you may not like Doge. You may not like what they're doing. You may not be saying to yourself that they're not being transparent. Let the process work itself out. We can't continue to be spending and accumulating $2 trillion a debt a year. You may not know this, but the interest on the debt right now is higher. It's over $1 trillion. It's more than we're spending on our defense budget. Let that sink in. There's a lot of fraud and waste in the government. And it's our money, and they're not being stewards. It's like your millennial child living in the basement, living rent-free, not getting a job, not being a steward of your money, actually taking money and not even knowing what they're spending it on, and continuing the cycle. And you continue to perpetuate it, and you continue to allow that.
I love how you get so revved up.
And I think, to me, Julia, it comes down to people who are making payroll. Yeah. I've been making payroll since 1994. I've been in business for myself for over 30 years. I've had many sleepless nights where when it snows out in the restaurant, I don't make money. Or when I buy a property in real estate, it's not cash flowing and I put money into it. There's no one else out there. It's just me on an island. And I know a lot of you out there feel the same way I do. And then when you hear of the waste and the fraud and just the carelessness that they have with the money, and then they feel as if they're entitled to it and saying, wait, you don't have to know where we're spending the money. We're smart. We're the smart people. Well, apparently they've been smart because they've been living off the hog. And now they've realized, wow, someone's here and trying to make a dent or trying to change the narrative. Let's at least change the narrative. There are a lot of government workers out there who are doing a great job. It seems as if we're trying to vilify all of them. No, we want to actually uphold and show the ones that are doing a great job, because those are the ones that are often not heard about. Those are the ones who go to work every day, put in their hours, and don't get acknowledged. And that's what we're trying to do with Doge. Get rid of the ones that aren't and uplift the ones that are. And plus even give them a pay raise if they're doing such a great job. We want to become more efficient. We want to do more with less dollars. And I think that's what, to me, Doge is all about, Julia.
I agree. It's funny because when we originally were talking about this conversation on our podcast, you were like, yes, let's talk about this as it relates to the family. So I love your passion about this. This is how our conversations are at home, and the kids sometimes.
Well, now my hands aren't flailing. I'm Italian, so my hands are really subdued now.
It's one of those moments where you feel so helpless for so many years. And I know that you and many, many people have. And finally, it's being revealed. It's finally being, and I'm not going to use the word fixed, but it's being called out, and people are being called out. And I'm relating this to back home. Only the reason because I thought about this is because it feels like finally you see a lot of, even maybe it's your relatives or your family members, or it could be your own house where you just seen families just run wild for so long, and you're just sitting back watching and saying, when are you going to take care of that? Oh, one day we'll take care of it. One day it'll come. No. And I think this is a good opportunity for all of us to sit back and say, okay, what about our own life? Yes, the government is, we don't work for the government. So I'm thankful that we don't have to deal with all of that, but we do have to deal with our daily lives and what we are allowing other people to get away with, because a lot of times they're our own family, their own children. Maybe they're even our spouses. Maybe our spouse is the one spending the money carelessly and not paying attention and not seeing and so this is an opportunity, I think, because it's out in the open to say, okay, where are we going to be now? Declutter. I love that word, declutter. It makes me really happy.
Well, I don't want to declutter because you shouldn't be cluttered in the first place.
Well, that's the problem.
Yes.
But
so how do you declutter? For me, in this situation that we have right now, it's as if you have to go cold turkey.
Well, I think too, first, before we go cold turkey, I think you have to be aware of what you have, because a lot of times I say, okay, go declutter your room. It's like, okay, I have so much stuff. The kids want to go clothes shopping. It's like, okay, we got to declutter your room first. And I think that's where we have to start. It's like, what do we have right now? And what are the things? And you said get rid of certain things. A lot of things the kids are like, oh, no, we need this. This is a sport that I need to take. Actually, technically, you don't. You don't need to take every sport out there just because, even if you're good at it, it's not a necessity.
It's a need versus a want.
It's a need versus a want. What is necessary? And what is you just like to do, you want to do. And we want to give our children every opportunity sometimes where it's to the point where it's too much. Sometimes they just need to be bored, to be creative, and that takes no money at all. But I think to be aware of what you have before you, to just get a reflection, see a list of the things that you have and say, okay, I don't need this. This is something that's I just want this. And then you can go down the line of decluttering, slashing out things, getting rid of subscriptions.
She's problem solving. I'm not problem solved yet because we haven't gotten to that point yet. I'm going to shamelessly plug my best-selling book, Happy Money, Happy Family, Happy Legacy, because this is truly important. The relationship that this country and the government has with money is truly toxic. Let's go back to the 1970s. I always tell my students and anybody that I'm coaching, what is your relationship with money? Well, in 1971, the government got off the gold standard. All of a sudden, they were able to print money. And that's where the relationship changed. They stopped having respect for money. All of a sudden, they were able to start printing and overspending, and the toxicity started. And now you see where you are today. You have entitled, spoiled rats in office that are stealing money. They're not being stewards of money. So their relationship with money is not, in my opinion, a good relationship with money. That doesn't create happy money. To me, it's unhappy money. And you need to continue to feed the beast and feed the beast, and it never stops. And it's a constant cycle of wanting more and more and more. And they're not being stewards of money. And then ultimately, the happy legacy. What kind of legacy are these politicians leaving for the next generation? You remember, I started with almost $4 trillion in debt back in the 1990s. We're at $37 trillion in debt. You have an unhealthy relationship with money. All of a sudden, that creates an unhealthy legacy for this country. If we don't get it under control and we don't start focusing on what Julia said, the needs, what we truly need, and cut out all of the wants. And I guarantee you, if they go through this budget line item by line item, they'll be able to balance this budget in the next 12 months. It takes a lot of political will, and it's going to take a lot of haggling, but we need to do this to get this country back on track. If you want to get inflation under control, you have to stop this mindless spending. You have to stop this printing of the dollar that they've done over the last 5 years. They've done it forever for the last 40 or 50, but this last 5 years has really exploded. And understanding that and going line item by line item as an adult, what Julia said, let me solve for a second now that she said, if you're an adult and you've got a family and you're raising a family, you need to create the spending plan, not a budget, because a budget sounds restrictive, but your spending plan. How much money's coming in versus how much money's going out. I just learned on a podcast yesterday, Julia, that the IRS, I think, takes in $5 trillion a year. They take in $500 billion in late payments. It's insane, the money that comes into the coffers of the U.S. government, right? Understand the income coming in. Then you look at your expenditures. And for us growing up, we had a great relationship. We had cash growing up. We didn't have credit cards, so we knew exactly what we were spending. But now that we're in this generation and we're dealing with credit cards, credit, Apple Pay, it's so easy. Zen, you got Zelle, Venmo, the money goes out so easy. There's no accountability to the money. And then at the end of the month, you're like, where did I spend all of my money? That's what they've really been able to create, that relationship with money right now. You don't respect it anymore. It's not tangible anymore. You have to bring the word tangibility back to it. It has to become real to you once again. You have to say, if this costs me $500 and I make $50 an hour, it's going to cost me 10 hours to pay for that thing. Then all of a sudden you start understanding the value of money and what you need to do to create, to be able to buy these things. Let's take a quick time out to hear from our sponsors. Money isn't just about numbers. It's about the life you build, the family you strengthen, and the legacy you leave behind. In Happy Money, Happy Family, Happy Legacy, you'll discover how to align your finances with what truly matters, building a life of peace, security, and purpose. Because wealth isn't just what's in your bank account, it's the impact you leave behind. Get your copy today and start creating a legacy that lasts. And we're back. Let's bring Doge back into the family and how this can relate to your family.
Well, I mean, we talked about it earlier, and I think it's, as you were talking about, it's revealing where we're spending money, where we're spending our time, because our time is important as well. And I do love one of the things, I guess it was Elon or somebody put out something. I want to know 5 bullet points that you did last week. Oh, I loved that. I was like, I'm taking that. I'm actually going to take that. I want to hear from the kids. I want to know 5 things you did yesterday or maybe today, because it creates accountability, I guess, conversation, but also a reflection. A lot of times, because we were talking about the older kids yesterday about it, they're like, sometimes I don't remember what I did. I'm like, that's the point. If we reflect, it's like, okay, what did I do that was valuable yesterday? Like, how did I, if you're being in a business, we have a company through Barbaro 360. What did I do for the company yesterday? I want to know 5 things you did yesterday. What did you do yesterday for school, for the kids that are still homeschooling? I want to know 5 major things that you learned yesterday. And I think what it does is it creates a conversation, a relationship with each other, with each person in the family, but it also creates that accountability. And it's like, okay, and tomorrow I really want to do this, that, and the other thing. And so now you're going to remember the things that you learned yesterday.
And what happens if they have pushback? If they're like, I don't want to do that.
100%. My kids already had pushback, the ones I talked about it. But I think the whole point is explaining, hey, listen, this is actually good for your growth. This is good for your future. Because, we all have, I wake up in the morning and I write down the things, and I know you do too. It's time blocking. It's what you're going to be doing today. And if I don't do that, I got off of that for a couple of weeks, and wow, what wasted time I had. Like a lot of things did not get done. I couldn't remember what I had to do. So I went back to that time blocking this morning, actually. I went back to all the things that I want to accomplish today. And I shared it with one of my kids and they're like, oh, that's right. That actually really works. Okay. So why not introduce this? And yes, you're going to get pushback. And I don't mean it to say this is what we're going to be doing now. Just say, hey guys, this has really helped me. Does anyone want to start doing it with me? And I think that's a better way to approach certain things with your family, is to say that you're on this journey together instead of here's my authority and I'm telling you to do this. It doesn't usually work.
So what happens if the child says, I really need Netflix. I really want Netflix.
100%.
But you can't afford it.
Yes.
I mean, honestly, like you're going into the negative every month.
100%. And, I think that's where, and I know you talk about this in your book, is that the kids do need to know where you are financially. And they do need to hear the worries and the stresses that we have when it comes around money. Because a lot of times, you are so good at talking about the relationship with money, and the kids don't know what that is because you never had that conversation. So maybe this is a time to talk about it and say, listen, we're going through a really difficult time now, or we're trying to cut back, or we're trying to save for certain things. And out of all the things, can you help me choose some things that are not necessary right now? And I think sometimes too is like we think like we're going to cut it forever. You're never going to have that Netflix again. Hey, what if we just cut back for a little while and see how it goes?
Or what about if you get a second job and we can afford it that
100%.
way? You're trying to create solutions.
You said this in a previous, you did a recording today and you said, hey, you come up with a solution. What do you think a solution would be? And I think that would be engaging with the children in a sense of, let's all come up with a solution instead of just relying on dad, just relying on mom.
But Julie, I think the first step is for the parents to understand what their relationship with money is, because we don't find ourselves in these situations unless we put ourselves in these situations. Back in 2008, I had a struggle. I didn't have a good relationship with money.
Yeah.
I was blaming everybody else. I was blaming the economy. I was blaming inflation. I was blaming the Great Recession. There were people out there that were making money. I wasn't one of them. And my relationship with money was not good.
I'm just going to cut you there for a second. I am telling everyone, and I don't normally advertise books, but I'm recommending this book highly. It's Gino's book, and it's Happy Money, Happy Family, Happy Legacy. And I do recommend it because of what he's talking about is the relationship with money. We never thought about this before, and this was a struggle for us for many, many years. And I love how he explains and asks the question of what your relationship with is money, because it does explain a lot about how you spend, how you save, and all the worries that we have and the fears. So I plug your book a little.
Thank you, Jill. I already shamelessly plugged it once. The money personas are in the book. Avoiding is one of the money personas. That's the government. They're avoiding right now. They're going to kick the can down the road, right? Gambling is another persona. They're gambling with our money, which is even worse. It's not even their money. It's like your millennial child at home who's gambling with your money. Investing is another persona. They're not investing the money, right? They're not saving the money. That's another persona. So if you look at the money personas, it's really interesting, Julie, what's going on with the government. They don't have a great relationship with money. That's an understatement. They have a terrible relationship with money. And then you look at these personas, it's like, wow, bringing it back to the family. It's all about understanding what your relationship is, what the persona is. And more importantly, I think it's encapsulated by the values that you want to adhere to in your family. What are the values that you want to adhere to in your family? For us, it was about responsibility. It was about opting out of the system, about having control over our lives, about having autonomy. I mean, that's what money ultimately gives you. If you make a lot of it, it gives you autonomy. It's really a result. It's really about creating and earning happy money. Right now, the government is not working with happy money. It's so unhappy, and they need to continue, like I said, to make more of it. And it doesn't make them any happier. It's, Julie, I mentioned in the book, the happy chemicals. It's as if the government is on one big fat dopamine kick and they can't get over it because they need to keep feeding the beast. Are you on that journey? Are you just having to spend money because it makes you feel good? But ultimately, the more money you spend, you don't feel any better. It doesn't make you any happier.
Yeah, I think that's something to reflect, especially at home. If you're bothered that the government's doing this, I think it's a reflection on yourself and your relationship with money, and also your family's relationship with money, because that's something that's important. It's when our children or our spouses or husband, wives, whoever, no matter what you give to them, no matter how much money they have, no matter all of the stuff they have, it's never enough. It's never good enough. They want more. It's like, okay, great. I got that toy or whatever it is. But mom, look what I want this. and maybe it's the wife. Maybe she's like, well, she wants a purse. So I got that last time. Now I want this one, whatever it is. And I think it's something, it does reflect on you. And maybe we can work on something about what you feel about yourself and what you think you're worth, because that's something to go into. When I see the kids not happy about anything, there's something else going on. And so maybe this is a good time to think about that.
What I love about the time we're living in right now is we're having the conversation, at least. Whereas years ago, everyone knew there was something wrong and everyone was in denial and everyone was avoiding. And I think now there's going to be a lot of bumps in the road. There's going to be a lot of things that I don't even like what they're doing with Doge. There's a lot of things that you're not going to like what you're doing. All of a sudden, I can't go out to my favorite restaurant every week. I've got 3 cars and they're all leased. Maybe I should only be driving 2 cars. I've got a second home where it's hard for me to pay the mortgage. I go on these amazing vacations 3 times a year. Maybe I can only go once a year. These are hard. They're challenging, but these are things that we need to look for, because if you don't take care of them today, they're going to only get worse and they're going to perpetually get harder and harder as we go on, Julia.
Yeah, I like that. I do. And I think it's maybe a moment where we can kind of reflect on our identity and see who we are and why we feel certain ways.
And don't you think that this is a good time with Doge is having this conversation with the American people?
100%.
And this is how you should be having this conversation with your wife or your husband.
Yeah.
They're hard conversations. I had told you where the government came back from 1971, where they got off the gold standard. Well, did you ever ask your wife or your husband, well, how was money like in your house? Did you talk about money? Did your parents feel an abundance about money? Was there fear about money? If you don't understand where they came from and then you have a different relationship and you get together, all of a sudden it's going to be difficult. And as you start getting older, your children start adopting your habits and your ways, whether they're good or they're bad. And if you think you're not talking about it and you're avoiding it, that's probably even worse, Julia, because all of a sudden that's what they start learning.
Yeah, no, I think that's when we first started talking about our relationship with money, like how we were when we grew up. I never really thought about it.
I didn't either.
And then as I started talking about it, I'm like, oh, this is why I spend. This is why I don't worry or I'm afraid or I'm not afraid. But then I thought, oh my gosh, we have 6 kids in the house and they have a different view on money.
Each one of them, right?
Because of us. And I was like, oh, it's like, wait a second, I forgot about that.
Yes.
And so we don't even realize that. I mean, obviously we know that we are the kids' model, right? We're the ones that they look at for a lot of things.
Sometimes we forget that.
And we do forget. And that's one of the things I forgot about. And I noticed, for instance, like, if you were away or something, if you were gone and we were with the kids, I would spend more money than if you were there. And I thought that was interesting. And the kids knew that. So I was like, wow, that's interesting. And so we actually had a conversation about it, the kids and I, one day when we were out. And I said, did you ever notice? And they're like, yeah, we did. And I'm like, what do you think that is? And I brought them into the conversation. And I think we forget that even if we don't agree, and you're talking about Doge and the government and everyone's upset, some people are thrilled, even if we don't agree, to be able to have a conversation without getting worked up. And yeah, my husband gets worked up because he's Italian and that's just how you are. And I actually love it. Sometimes I just sit back and watch. But to be able to have a conversation and to be comfortable enough to disagree or to have a slightly different view and to still be comfortable and confident that you're going to have a good relationship, that is something to strive for. And I think so many times that we're like, oh, we don't agree. We're not going to be friends anymore, or we're not going to be family anymore. Or we're not going to see each other anymore. And I just advise you against that, because you're missing out on something so beautiful as to disagree with someone and still love them. Right?
I get worked up very simply because I know how great families can be.
Yeah.
And I know how great this country is. And as far as legacy goes, I know ultimately we don't really own anything and God owns everything, but he's given us this treasure and this ability. And I don't want to see people squandering it. I don't want to see people losing it. I don't want to see people stealing it. I want to leave the next generation better than I was, because that's what my parents did. My parents left our generation better than theirs was. And that's what legacy is all about. And if we have to have some uncomfortable conversations with our children or with our spouses, it's well worth it. To do the work is hard, no doubt about it. But not to do the work is even harder, because you don't want to have your kids growing up in their 20s and 30s and not understanding how to balance a checkbook, not understanding the true value of hard work and money, not being able to start a family because they can't afford something, because they got tons of student debt and they have tons of credit card debt. And how did that come about? I don't even know. I'm trying to avoid that That's why I wrote The Happy Money, The Happy Family, Happy Legacy, because it all goes together and it wraps around your values. Start becoming conscious of what you're spending your money on. Start becoming conscious of what you spend your time on, and start understanding the legacy that you want to leave for your next generation.
Gino, this has been an interesting and fun conversation, as always.
It's interesting because I took off. The plane was a little bumpy in the middle. My wife's like, you better calm down a little bit. You're going to have a stroke. I'm like, you know what? I get worked up because to me, it's just, I've been through a lot in the last 30 years of being in business, growing the family. And it comes down to the responsibility aspect and being able to have the conversations. And if you can't even have a conversation, how are you going to find solutions? We need to find solutions to these problems. To me, they're not really hard problems to solve. It's income over expenses. But when you throw the money in, all of a sudden the emotions get higher and you can't have conversations. We've been dumbed down to where we can't have these conversations. Let's try to find some ground here, because I think everyone listening to this has the same sentiment as I do. We want to make a better future for our children. We have a great country that we can do that. Let's try to find solutions where we can start saving some money and reinvesting that money into the country.
Learn more about us at barbaro360.com. And until next time, thank you for sharing this journey with us. And until next time.